if the internet and the advent of technology has done anything for the human race, it has made it very apparent who is genuine and who is not genuine. Almost to the subconscious level that most people, if you spend any amount of time like thinking through those things, you can figure out who's being genuine and who's not, and who's, to your point, like they're doing it for the views, they're doing it for the money, they're doing it for whatever the thing is at that time, right, that they're working through. But it's made it incredibly easy, I think, for people to be able to make that distinction. Thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you joining, whichever platform you're joining from, wherever you're seeing this. Appreciate you guys being a part of the conversation. Happy to jump into a conversation with Jarrell Flowers. Jarrell and I went to school together a very, very long time ago. feels like that was a whole other lifetime ago at this point, but happy to jump into a conversation. Jarrell's doing some amazing stuff, leading the Rise movement. He's an entrepreneur. He is an artist, just an all-around amazing person. So, Jarrell, want to give you the floor to kind of walk through what you guys are doing, kind of tell us what's happening with you guys and what's going on.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you so much, man, for having me on and for having this conversation. And yeah, my name is Jarrell Flowers. I am from San Antonio, Texas, and not born, but raised here for most of my life here in San Antonio. And as Jeff mentioned, we did end up going to school together a lifetime ago. And so after I got out of school, well, I'll say that I met my wife at the school that we went to. And so we got married and then jumped right into church work. So we jumped into youth ministry, all of these different things. At the same time, I was also kind of starting my artist career, doing hip hop, spoken word, all that kind of stuff. And then I just started, that started taking off, and I started touring and doing all that kind of stuff. Long story short, I got burned out, needed community as a creative, didn't feel like I had that in the space that I was in. And so my wife and I started a nonprofit called the Rise Movement. And what started off as like one community turned into a network of communities. And yeah, man, we're just rocking it right now. We've got, it's a little network that we have that provides community for creatives. And our mission with the Rise Movement is actually to empower creatives to transform the community through art and the gospel. And so I am all about platforming creatives and reaching people in creative ways. So that's where we're at right now. And of course, like you said, man, I am an entrepreneur. It kind of took me a long time to actually own that aspect of it, because I was kind of like, in this like ministry mindset, and I was like, no, we're doing ministry and all this kind of stuff.
It's a journey. Yeah.
Yeah. So owning the fact that I'm like, okay, I'm actually an entrepreneur, and this is a business. Me getting to that point. It was kind of a long journey, but once I got a hold of it, I was like, okay, this is, I'm going there, not looking back. And so now the way that I approach things, grateful for my upbringing, because, at the base of business is actually serving people, and I learned that in the church settings and everything. And so it's really cool, man, to see, everything blending together and working together, nothing being wasted,
Should specify there at the base of business, at the base of good business is serving others, right?
Yeah.
Because you can be in business and not serve people, and there's a very different distinction, between those two things. So, man, I want to lean into. So you were talking about like starting the journey and going from music, going from hip hop into getting into the spoken word, because I know it sounds like now you're doing a little bit more spoken word than you are kind of some of the other stuff. Walk me through that transition, and what did that look like for you? What kind of changed, or what did you just end up leaning into that, and that just the doors opened for that, or what was the transition like for that?
Yeah. So it really does go back to, this conversation about serving people well. I was actually doing a hip hop concert, and it was, you know, there was a span of different ages that were there. There was parents and kids and all of that were at the concert. And I remember one time, you know, I was doing the music, you know, performing the music, and I try to stay engaged with the crowd and just try to feel what's happening. And what I saw was that the kids were like really into it, but the parents were like lost, and they were just like basically like, "Hey, we're here for the kids." You know, I saw it in their facial expressions and everything, and I knew that the music, like the beats themselves, were kind of like a barrier. So what I ended up doing at that show, and this is really what kind of pushed me into spoken word. At that show, I finished the song, and then I did one of the verses without the music. And when I did that, I saw the light bulbs start turning on for the adults, and people I could actually understand what I was saying. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this, you know, this has a potential to actually reach both audiences. So then I started like doing that intentionally, and then that led to, you know, a whole different, you know, lane for me, and it's been really cool because, you know, I've been able to work closely with other churches and other organizations that wouldn't normally think of hip hop as promoting what they're doing, but they can see poetry with some cinematic music and all that kind of stuff to help get their message out. And so that opened me up to the business world and a lot more to the church world and stuff like that. So it's been like deep down inside, like I still love the music part of it. When I think about serving other people and giving them what they actually need, spoken word's been that avenue.
Yeah, it's been that vehicle for you. That's awesome. Yeah. And I know, like going back and looking at some of the ones that you've done over the years, like having seen some of those, like the way that you guys have done that with adding back the cinematic music, like you're talking about, and just some of those transitions we were just talking about a minute ago before we went live. You know, where there was even kind of some animation stuff going on in the background, and it was kind of tied in with everything that you were talking about. So it's not only the spoken word, but it's this whole kind of experience that you're kind of drawing somebody into from a storytelling standpoint, it's awesome. So, from a technology standpoint, what have you seen kind of in that journey in the music side and in spoken word? What have you seen that's really kind of stuck out to you as far as really being able to draw people in from a technology standpoint? Is it pairing it with, do you feel like each one of those things, like music, the music piece, and then potentially the additional animations and video or some of those kind of things, do you feel like it's a stair step of like the spoken word is one piece, and then adding the additional music adds a whole other element, and then adding the animation adds a whole other thing on top of that? Or do you feel like have you seen a steady response from the whole thing, or do you feel like it has more of an impact when you add those other dynamics into it?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, it definitely, you know, the visuals, the audio, everything, it creates an immersive storytelling experience, you know, and I really enjoy, you know, creating that atmosphere for people. And so, yeah, it really depends on what the situation demands, right? Because, you know, in me trying to help serve people, sometimes people ask me to do stuff that's live, and they want it to be very poignant. They want it to just hit home, and they just want the words and a spotlight and all of that. And that's the story that they want to tell, which is cool, you know. But a lot of times, especially now, with everything being so immersive and like just on social media, like you need to have a video somehow.
Yeah, right.
Like just in order to be seen, you know. So it's like at this point, me, you know, performing the spoken word, that is one element. But if the music can also tell a story, then that's another element too, right? So if I'm saying something particular and then the music also helps highlight a part of that story, that's a big deal. And then if the visual, if there's a visual in the background, and if that's also helping to tell part of that story, it just becomes like it's sight and sound, which is, it's basically like a movie at that point, and people can, it sticks.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting to see kind of how those things, come together. Like when somebody's doing what you're talking about, right? So there's the element of like the spoken word piece that you're doing. There's even the element of what you mentioned, like the lighting, for you, for that person on stage who's speaking and really focusing in just on that person, right? But then these other pieces of that add, as long as they're done correctly and it's with it pairs with what you're doing and what you're saying correctly, right? And pulls all those things together. To your point, I feel like it just drives all that home that much more, and it has that much more of an impact on people as you're experiencing it, right? I think that's interesting.
There's something that I love about storytelling too, where just thinking about culture too, just one of the things that's been heavy like on my heart is the idea of canceling, like not adding more noise than there needs to be, right? Or just even letting people have a pause in the performance. So I'll give you an example, like the one that I was just talking to you about, one that I did recently. Within that piece, I added, an intentional pause, right? So in the middle of the spoken word, I was saying, and then silence, for 400 years. It was like, so the visual, so what happened was there's all these lights and everything, and, it's very immersive. And then I say silence, then the background goes to black, and it's just that spotlight, right? For 400 years. And then it's just really cool to see that storytelling can be immersive, but also just kind of being sensitive to what's happening in culture right now. Everything is so loud. People actually enjoy pauses and silence, and that you give them that time to think and process and all of that, So it's really cool. Like it really does come down to the storytelling and knowing the audience and knowing what they want without like overwhelming them. Cause I think it's going to be cool, like it's knowing the audience.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of the previous guests on the show when we were talking about just overall like production value, right? Like knowing when to do the right amount of whatever it is that you're trying to do so that it reinforces your deal and doesn't like overshadow it or overwhelm it or, cause you issues with that. And that's almost an art unto itself as well, right? Just doing the right things at the right time to amplify what you're doing and to have more of an impact, but not detract from it and not overwhelm and take away from it. So,
it is knowing the audience. Like this audience was, it wasn't parents and kids. It was like mainly business owners and all of that. So they've got like a million things going, they've got all the emails and all the decisions to make. And then they were brought to that place to make a decision. So it's like, okay, how do I provide space for them to actually just take in, even if it's just for like a few seconds, you know what I mean? Like just, And then they may not be familiar with that art form too. I've been in some spaces where people call spoken word like, "Man, your rapping was really amazing," because that's all they can really think of. You know what I'm saying?
That's how they relate, right? Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, if they're in their minds, if they're trying to process rap, and then it's extra hard. They have to really like listen, and it's knowing the audience is serving people well, man. So,
totally get that. How do you feel like technology's changed the way that you're creating, and has it changed the speed at which you can create the things that you're doing now?
Yeah, I would give you. I'll kind of sum up my answer in this experience that I'm about to share with you. So just recently, I had a friend of mine reach out to me to do a spoken word. And it was a spoken word video, but he was using AI to give. Well, he asked me to write the spoken word. I wrote one, and then he was like, "Well, this is kind of what I this is what I came up with. And I was like, okay, well, why didn't you tell me that to begin with? And so that, Jeff, honestly, that was my first time kind of co-writing with anything AI. And I had to think of it as co-writing, right? Because that's, you know, it was his ideas. AI kind of like pulled, you know, kind of scraped the internet and all of that for his ideas, brought, you know, kind of centralized them. And then I had to kind of like co-write with that, you know? And so just kind of the rise of AI really is, I mean, it can enhance and it can threaten. It just depends on like your viewpoint of it, right? But I think you know, AI is here; it's not going away, and so we have to figure out how to use it as a tool. I think the purist, the art purist, is going to be like, no, it's got to be human. Everything's got to be human. But in actuality, we've been using technology tools to enhance music for a long time. And so it just depends on, you know, it's walking that line between, okay, how do you keep the sanctity and the sacredness of human creation while also utilizing these tools that could really actually help us work faster, you know? So there's that. I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like, you know? I was at a writing session and there were some guys who brought in some hooks that were AI hooks, you know? And, you know, I'm like, okay, how do we navigate that? How do we process that? Because on the downside, like, humans weren't singing it. On the upside, we actually wrote 10 songs in 2 days. You know
right. So I think it's, to your point, I think there's a piece there of it's the balance between ideation, iteration, changes that you can make, right? And from what I've seen on our side in business and what we do and those kind of things, yes, AI can do a lot. There's a lot of things that it can spit out. There's a lot of things that you can say, you know, do this thing for me, and it'll, you know, start spitting out all the different pieces of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, the better output you get is when you actually spend the time and think through, what is it that I am actually trying to communicate? Let me go through and put those thoughts together, you know, kind of iterate on that a couple of times, then feed it into something and say, what, you know, help me walk through this and clean this up. If I'm trying to speak to this group of people, what is language that makes sense to this group of people better than what I've got here, right? Those are some of the ways that you can kind of iterate and ideate on that. And I feel like I had this conversation with my wife, I think, probably a month and a half ago, something like that. It's like the whole thing of like, you know, obviously I'm sure you've seen the Suno and, you know, all the AI music stuff that's out there. Right. And there's just a lot of different pieces of that. And like, but at the end of the day, you still have to go through and have that initial creative thought or idea of a song about, or a verse about, or a course about, you know, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'd like to communicate. Here's what, you know, and it's that whole thing of like, one of the examples, I mean, they're not really a true comparison, but I mean, if you look at, you know, the original, what do you want to call it? The advent of the drum machine, right? Yeah. That kind of took things from one place to a totally different place. And you went from having to have a live drummer with a full drum kit and like recording in a studio and doing all the rest of that, to being able to like push a couple buttons. And now you've got a whole beat that you can do all kinds of stuff to. Did you really replace the creative thought process and the human aspect of it? You replaced like the one person playing the drums for it, but the creative thought process is still happening with a human who's kind of putting those things together. And I think there's been so many different pieces of evidence to show that even now, with things as good as they are, you can still tell if somebody has put in the effort for AI content, whether it's whether it's words, whether it's a video, whether it's music, whatever the thing is, you can tell if somebody's put in the effort to really tell a significant story and to tell it from an aspect that's not just a regurgitation of, all of these things just spliced together and that kind of stuff. So the human element of that, I think it's the speed to which that you can ideate and get your thoughts out in a format that makes sense and that you can communicate the message that you're trying to communicate. But to your point, I think it's one of those things that we all need to be cognizant of. If your motive is to replace the human element of it, it's a losing battle, because what's the point of doing that? I mean, like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to replace, a portion of the human element in this. It makes sense to ideate and help you do things faster and move things forward more quickly. But at the end of the day, like, there's got to still be some form of a creative thought process there. That kind of brings all that to light. So,
yeah. I think, what happens with technology a lot of times is that it really does kind of broaden the playing field for a lot of people, right? So people who didn't think that they could create at one point, now all of a sudden, like, creativity is an option.
Mm-hmm. Well, it lowers the barrier to entry, right? So, like, originally the barrier of entry was like, learn how to play an instrument, learn how to write a song, learn, musical structure, some of these other things. And so people, to your point, have those ideas, but they don't have the practical skill set to actually make them, a reality. Now, the argument that some people would make is it the investment of time in learning the skill that makes it more valuable? Right. So like, as you're going through, when you started your journey, originally writing and originally, coming up with the different rhymes and the things that you're doing and putting that to the different music and beats and things like that, is the value in what you're doing based on the fact that you spent, 10,000 hours mastering that skill, working that out, right? Like, it's just that whole thing of like, how do you quantify, like, where is that value coming from? Is the value in all of that time, or is the value in the idea? I would say for the individual, the value is in the investment of time, because it's made you who you are. It's made you, like, think about things and do things and learn things. And it's forced you to grow and to do things, right? So you wouldn't be the person who you are without that. But at the same time, it's like, you can't necessarily shortcut some of those things the way that I think some people think that you can, right? It's interesting. I don't know if I watched a podcast. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's one of, like, the huge AI artists, right? And it's actually a guy behind the scenes who's, like, putting all these things together, right? And we listened to a podcast where he was talking about, he's like, yes, it's AI putting some of this stuff together, but it's still me going through a creative process and defining what those things are. And, like, it's hours of iteration instead of what would have been weeks or months, going back and forth in a studio and those kind of things. And so it's like, you're still, it's just it's a very interesting thing to watch kind of start to happen, in the world today. So.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll get to a space where, the rise of, like, AI generated stuff is going to be so broad that the supply and demand kind of, like, flips to, the demand for human art is going to rise, because it's not as I guess accessible as AI art. You know what I'm saying?
I watched it. So I watched the interview. This was just probably a couple of days ago. But so John Mayer went through with, I think a business group of people, and they bought Charlie Chaplin's original studio. I think it's in LA somewhere, if I remember correctly, but they bought the studio space that he used for original movies and stuff that was later converted to, like, recording studio spaces and things like that. Right. They bought it, refurbished it, like, went through the whole thing and, like, made it what it is today, which is it's a pretty amazing place. One, for the historical value of, like, maintaining something that has a huge significance in both movie and music history. Right. Because I think there's, like, like Joni Mitchell and some other folks, like, recorded some of their really, really big albums there way back in the day. But he was talking about what he sees in the music industry, and you had all of these people, and it's like, you and I both kind of grew up through this time when music production was, like, transitioning from everything had to be recorded on tape to then everything was being recorded digitally, and like, you know, being able to record on a computer at your house became a thing in the early 2000s. Right. And like that capability started to exist. Right. And you could go and, you know, spend a significant amount less money than it would have cost you to go buy, you know, a studio space or buy the console or any of the other stuff that you would have had to have had. And so then like you're in your house and now you can record all this stuff, and you've seen this the last, you know, 20 years of time where people have been like, oh, like I can just record this at my house. His interesting perspective on it was he sees it coming where it's like people are wanting to get back into a community of musicians. Absolutely. And wanting to come back to a place where it's like you have a creative process and a flow. And that just makes me think about what you guys are doing with Rise, right? I mean, you're creating a space for people to come together and have those conversations and create something out of that community, out of that, you know, time frame. And it's interesting to think about, like, you know, when you get to a place where like, okay, you've done the thing at home and you've like really built the thing, but there's still like, I don't even know, like there's so many people today that I've talked to that are, you know, younger than we are, that still like, you know, they have that whole dream of like, I want to go record at, you know, a huge studio somewhere because of like the thing that is with that. Right. And one of the things I thought was interesting that he talked about was like when you walk into a room, every room is different. Right. The dynamics of every room are different. How you interact with the people in that room are different. Like it's just a whole other kind of creative process and thought process there. But I love it. Yeah. Love it. But I think there's a lot, you know, coming back on the community side, right? I mean, so I think it ties in with what you guys are doing. I can see that being a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. For us, man, you know, we're kind of like considering, okay, you know, with AI and like products being able to be made quicker, faster, like what is the actual currency going to be in the future? And it really is going to be like the people aspect of everything. And so, yeah, we want to create music. Yes, we're working on all that kind of stuff, but we want to hold kind of like the digital product and then the actual, you know, physical presence and intention. So we you know, started a festival last year. And I think for artists coming up, like that's going to be the currency. It's like, okay, yeah, anybody can it's going to be to a place where anybody can make it online because things are so accessible and so easy. But like, do you actually have a movement behind you of people who are willing to actually show up, have this community experience and even pay dollars for it, you know, like that's going to be kind of the mark of an artist. So I guess a touring artist, you know, you know, that's gonna become a major currency in the future for sure. Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to watch and see what happens with some of this stuff, because what we found, and I've seen this in technology in general, like when the capability of manufacturing gets to a place that anybody can go out and essentially white label a product and put it out on the market, your quality goes from, you know, potentially really good, and then it falls through the floor, right? Because you've tried to do this mass market thing to where everybody has access, and like, you know, like we're talking about, like everybody could go out and create AI music right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that particular song is going to go viral because it may not have the emotion of a human being behind it. Right. Like, I mean, there are always going to be exceptions to that rule. Right. I'm sure there are things that, you know, people have put out that have had, you know, a greater uptick and those kind of things. But there's a piece of some of this. I think it'll be interesting to watch how, you know, what some of this looks like. The other thing that I'm curious to see how this starts to look and how this starts to happen is when people start to figure out, and I was watching one of Rick Beato's videos the other day. He was talking about, exactly what we just talked about as far as the advent of recording studio, recording at home, like what that did to not only the recording industry, but like the music industry in general, and like how many people now had access to create their own music from home and those kind of things. But he was talking about, like, you could go through now, because computing has gotten to the place that it has gotten to, you could go through now and download a large language model on a PC at your house.
right? And start to like consolidate things privately without giving your information to the huge AI companies, without doing the other stuff, you can have complete control over that, right? And you can really determine what that thing is supposed to be doing and dial that into the place where it's like, okay, I want to create this thing. I want it to focus on this or that or whatever, right? And you can go through and teach that thing what it's supposed to do. And you could do that in your house, and you don't have to spend a crazy ton of money to do that. When people start to figure that out, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the rest of this model, where like you have these huge data centers happening and, you know, all the rest of this stuff going on. Like there's just, I think we're in for some very interesting times over the next few years, just seeing how some of this plays out. Right.
Dude, so Will.i.am was like on an interview, and he was just talking about the importance of kind of like copywriting like your own image and likeness, because you know your information is being collected, and AI is basically like scraping the internet for best of kind of thing. Copywriting your own image and likeness is going to be how people, you know, secure legacy for future generations. I thought that was like a fascinating interview, man, because he's actually teaching that right now in I don't know some college course.
Well, I mean, you think about what's already happened. I mean, James Earl Jones sold his voice to Lucasfilm, right? What? For like basically all the future Darth Vader voice, right? Like, I mean, things like that have already happened, and they happened like years ago, right? Like this is not a new thing for today. This was even before like some of these things started to really become like mainstream ideas and some of that kind of stuff. There's already people that are doing those deals, you know, so it's like you retire at 80 years old and you sell your likeness and voice and whatever else, and you know, they've got permission to use your stuff for however long, and you're getting paid for that. I mean, there's just a whole other piece of stuff that, you know, I mean, that's like, you know, Brave New World kind of stuff. Right. But, just to kind of segue a little bit, what platforms are you guys seeing the most engagement on? So like from a social media standpoint or video standpoint, are you guys really targeting specific platforms, or are you hitting kind of all of them? And I'm curious what you guys are seeing the most impact with at this point.
Yeah. So Instagram for us has been the thing. TikTok also, but I'm kind of like leaning in more towards YouTube right now, just because it allows for it allows for like long form content that I feel like I need to post, because I want conversations to still be human, you know?
Yeah.
Like I want people to, for the people who have the bandwidth to endure a 30-minute conversation, I want them to actually, you know, my videos to be accessible to that, you know? So it's kind of a both and, you know. The average length of songs right now, because they're made for virality and all that, it really is like 2 minutes at this point. I remember just a few years ago, I was thinking, oh man, maybe like 4 years ago, I was like, man, this 3-minute song is like really short, you know? And now it really is like 2 minutes. And so because things are made to just be consumed so quickly, part of me is like, okay, I don't think we were just, as humanity, we were wired to only have 2-minute conversations. That hits a certain audience of people who are just like, okay, let's talk, get out of my face. And we go to that's a certain kind of audience, but then there's a whole different audience that actually wants to sit and engage, and you build trust with those people. And I think that's going to be more on the YouTube side of things. And so I'm trying to, you know, transition some stuff to actually live more on YouTube. Because, you know, we're living in a world where people are technology and even some of these apps and platforms, they are pushing people towards creativity and everything short, even YouTube's like their version of TikTok and Reels is shorts. It's literally short.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, well, if I'm gonna do both, YouTube actually provides for that short and long form content.
Well, and I think the strategy there too, I mean, like from that standpoint, if you're doing long form content, you can take your long form content and cut it up into 60 pieces of short form, depending on what you're talking about and depending on the conversations you're having. Right. So at that point, like you start to see the thought process of like, hey, if I'm having these conversations, like we're doing now, like if I'm having these conversations about stuff and it's 30 minutes or 40 minutes or however long it is, right? Then you can kind of take that and you can take the excerpts of that, the things that are like paramount to whatever message you're trying to get out today, and use that for the next, week, and like kind of constantly reiterate on it, change it, adapt it, flip it around, do something different with it. Right. Because that's, it's such a, I don't know how you guys are dealing with this. I'd be curious to get your feedback on this, but like just getting content out the door, like getting enough content out the door so that you don't get lost in the noise, right? It's an interesting thought process because there's like billions and billions and billions of, minutes of video out there now, right? That you can get to. I remember back in the day when like, YouTube was like a blip on the radar and like nobody was really thinking about it. And now like it's, second largest search engine in the world, right? Yeah. And you can literally find instructions on how to do anything, like anything you want to do, you can find it on YouTube. Somebody somewhere, has done hair transplants on a Barbie doll, and you can find a how-to video on how to do that. Like it's just crazy what you can find on there. But, how do you feel like with so many tools out there that you can use, how do you make sure that technology is amplifying the message that you're trying to convey and not distracting from that message? What are some principles or a thought process that you're using for that?
Yeah, that's great. I think that in order for me to figure out which platforms, which tools I want to use, I have to get really clear on like who I am and what exactly my message is. And then everything else kind of serves that purpose instead of me trying to jump on every platform and be all the things to all the people. You know what I mean? Like, and so for me, like I have to, I just have to know myself and to know even my personality, because at the end of the day, when somebody does come and find my content, I want them to fall in love with, me as a person and not what I've portrayed to be in order to get clicks and views and all of that, So that again, like, so for me, that's one of the reasons why YouTube is, because like for me personally, like having this conversation, it's great. Like I'm not like, okay, when is this gonna be over? Like I got like this is right. Like this is kind of, I love having conversations, especially intellectually stimulating conversations. It's like, it makes you think. And so for me, like the tool of, TikTok and all that kind of stuff, like it's not really as intriguing to me as YouTube, because it's just not my personality, lends itself to long form content. And even when I put albums together, like when I put albums together, I'm thinking about this big like story arc, like, so it's not necessarily like made to go viral. It's just like me telling a big long story. So in answer to your question, like just thinking about tools that help me to do that more effectively, and then able to connect to the audience. That's all based on me as a person. And I think, Jeff, that there's not a lot of people who really do that work to figure out who am I, what is my personality, what's actually going to be sustainable. what tools are going to help that to be sustainable. And a lot of people really are just trying to go viral. And so they're going to try a lot of things and do a lot of things. And then if they actually do go viral, it's not going to be sustainable because it really wasn't them. And so I think doing the work to just like, for me, it's doing the work for me to like know myself, know my personality, and then just finding those tools, trusting the process.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of the point that you're making there, I think I've had this conversation with a few different people. If the internet and the advent of technology has done anything for the human race, it has made it very apparent who is genuine and who is not genuine. Almost to the subconscious level that most people, if you are paying attention at all when you're scrolling on your phone or looking at videos or whatever, if you spend any amount of time like thinking through those things, you can figure out who's being genuine and who's not, and who's, to your point, like they're doing it for the views, they're doing it for the money, they're doing it for whatever the thing is at that time, right? That they're working through. But it's made it incredibly easy, I think, for people to be able to make that distinction very, very quickly in some cases. I mean, it's like you can be scrolling on your phone on TikTok or Shorts or any of those things and run across something, and you can tell really quickly, like, is this just, AI slop that somebody's trying to get me to pay attention to? Is this somebody who's like genuinely like, speaking a thought process or a message or whatever? And to your point, like going through the deep work of who am I as an individual? What am I trying to put into the world? And who am I trying to talk to? And why am I trying to talk to that person? Like what are those things? Just going through that process, that's it, as an individual, as a business owner, as a creative, as all of those things wrapped up together. If you're going through and doing that work, that I think is more meaningful. And at the end of the day, you'll have a much larger return on your investment, even beyond monetary, money and any of the rest of that, right? Like it will make you a better person. It'll make you a better person, right? So.
That's a I'm telling you, man, we could be here forever. That is a big conversation because it kind of like goes into the whole aspect of like relationship, because that's really what business is, right? At some level it is building trust, it's relationships and all of that. And a lot of people are not great entrepreneurs because they don't know how to actually build a good friendship. You know what I mean? Like, right. So like, how does technology enhance building relationships with people? Like that's a big conversation, man.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces to that, right? I mean, it's one of the reasons that music is as emotional as it is and it connects the way that it does. It's the reason that movies are as emotional as they are and connect the way that they do. Because there is a piece to storytelling, there is a piece to communicating with somebody on a level that, either walks through something that they're dealing with in their life or makes them feel something because it reminded them of their parents or their sister or their brother or, whatever the deal was. And it's like being able to have those connections with people, to your point, I think in the business world, relationships, start to become a premium at that point because it's, I mean, people put all kinds of things in place to, check you on price and to, run you through the procurement circle of, are you, gouging us on price? Are you fair? Are you market value? All of those kind of things. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, all of those decisions are made based on how that person interacts with another individual and has a relationship with another individual. And do they trust that person? Right. Even in those instances where there's other things happening, there's a portion of this piece that like people want to trust who they're doing business with. They want to have a deeper relationship with who they're doing business with. Because at the end of the day, like if you trust that person, that they're going to take care of, what they're going to do. I have this conversation. I've told the team this so many times. The bar in business right now is so low. Pick up the phone, do what you say you're going to do. You do those two things, you'll close more business than you can think of. Because think about how many times you've called somebody to do something and you haven't heard back from them for 3 days, 4 days. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. So we had an issue at the house a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, where we had like some squirrels getting into our attic, right?
Okay.
And so that's kind of an immediate, like, when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you hear stuff crawling in the wall and whatever, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
we called a couple of different wildlife removal companies. I think we called 4 of them. One of them never heard back from. One of them called us back 2 days later. One of them called me back 3 hours after I called, and one of them called us in like 15 minutes. We went with the one that called us in 15 minutes because it was like an immediate need. Like, sometimes there's more market research that goes into things. Like if you're doing a huge addition or you're doing, a bigger thing or some of that kind of stuff, like you've got more time. And so you don't think as a consumer, like, I didn't hear back, so this means that whatever. But when there's like an immediate need for something like that, just for you to be able to get in touch with somebody, if you can get in touch with somebody 90% of the time, that person's going to win your business because they talk to you first, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a huge deal. And it's nothing more than just the connection with somebody who heard what you needed, understands what's happening, because like I probably could have found a better deal, somebody who would have done it cheaper or whatever. But at the time, like I'm concerned about, like, I want to get these things out of my attic, right? Right. It's just like you want to do that as fast as possible. And so it's just this whole thing of, that person heard what I'm saying. I know when they're coming. So it's like you start to lay out that plan in your mind of, okay, I talked to this person. They're going to come tomorrow. They're going to look at this. It's going to cost me X number of dollars, whatever the thing is. But that first domino is like, how fast do you respond to somebody in business? And those 2 things, just answering the phone and doing what you're saying you're going to do and following through, man, it is such a
long way.
It goes that just those 2 things go an extremely long way. There's a whole other roadmap beyond that as far as communication and, but if you're following through and you're doing what you say you're going to do, like those things, typically don't become issues, so, man, what would you say is the one technology for you guys that has had the single largest impact on what you're doing? Could be for you in music, could be for spoken word, could be for Rise. But like when you think about technology, what is the one piece of technology that to you sticks out having the most impact on what you've been able to accomplish up to this point?
Man, well, I would say, like, when we first started Rise, we were kind of like centered around community, right? So we were like, okay, we've got to, that need for community came out of a personal need for mine. And so that became kind of like the cornerstone of what we were doing. So, so that started happening. And then obviously like, the COVID ended up happening. So at that point, Zoom became like the thing, right? Because we were focusing on community and everybody getting pulled together. I mean, we were using Zoom like all the time,
Yeah.
It was crazy. Then as our organization began to shift direction more into putting music out, then obviously like the music programs, those became like our big thing. And that's where we are. That's where we are right now too. So, I mean, we work with like a lot of different people who have home studios, and we haven't gone to like a huge studio yet for a project. And I'm not really sure that we will right now, because we're trying to make these third spaces and become studios. Like, so we're partnering with an organization here in the city that's part of the whole arts and culture ecosystem, San Antonio Arts and Culture. And so they have like a theater space. And so instead of going to a studio, we're like, okay, well, how do we take our audio and video equipment, and since we're meeting there, how do we just start creating albums there, right? So so the technology obviously behind that, depending on who we get to shoot, a lot of just all the AV capturing stuff. I mean, some people use some people are using like Studio One.
Yeah.
That's been a big one for us, for the audio stuff. The video stuff, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really mess with all of that. Like, I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I use I'm all about the audio stuff,
the audio side.
And how to capture it. But I mean, I know people are still using what's the big one that people are using?
Adobe Premiere. Yeah, Adobe Premiere would be one. There's quite a few out there, but on the audio side, I mean, you'd have Studio One, you'd have Logic, Pro Tools, any of those kind of things. This is kind of a random question. I'm just curious to see what you say on this. What's your favorite plugin for audio?
So I actually, oh man, so if I'm using Logic, one of my friends uses Logic, and there's one that has like it's the big one that has like all of the synths and all of the little, it's the airy stuff.
Yeah.
all the
ambient.
All of the ambient sounds. I forget the name of it though. But like anytime I'm making a beat or anything like that, I'm like, okay, pull that one up, because it has kind of like a blend of like synth, but it also has like some orchestral kind of stuff in there too. And then of course, like, it's got some of the pulsating synth things too. And so a lot of, especially for a lot of my intros, I like to make them like very cinematic if I can. Gosh, what is the name of that thing? Like, again, like, so I used to be like very, very like super, I used to like make all of my beats and everything.
Yeah.
But then when I started like doing spoken word, and I started actually, that part of my business started coming up, I was like, okay, I need to start outsourcing some stuff.
And have somebody else start working on it.
Yeah, my favorite one to use, my favorite program to use is Logic, but and then and Studio One sometimes, because I have a beast producer who uses Studio One. But yeah, Logic is the one for me. But there's like a specific plugin that everybody uses for Logic, and I don't know why I can't even think of it right now. But
that's funny.
It's amazing. Anything ambient though. That's my vibe.
Yeah, it gives you that cinematic feel. Yeah. That's awesome. Good stuff. That's awesome. Man, this has been fantastic, dude. I really appreciate you taking the time. Tell folks where they can find you guys. Tell folks where they can find you and find Rise. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. But just, want to make sure that you guys, get out in front of as many people as possible. Yeah, man, I appreciate that. So our website is risemovement.co. And then of course, like, all of our social media and everything's like on the website. And so that's where you can find Rise. And then I'm on social media too. Just look up Jarrell and I'm sure you'll find me. Yeah. They'll find you somewhere. We'll make sure we get all that in the show notes. Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was a blast to have this conversation and kind of talk through what you guys are doing. So excited to see what happens in the next couple of years for you guys, man. Dude, no, thank you for having me, man. It's been an honor to have this conversation with you. Yeah, appreciate it.